Karen.
Sorry, I forgot to start recording.
That's okay. There we go. So if we can put that up, and by all means, make sure you just interrupt, because as soon as we share the screen, I can't see faces anymore. I'm just seeing the shared screen. So we'll get the form up. Okay, we do definitely need to zoom that one up a little bit, Renata, if at all possible. All right. So when we are looking at the top of it, you will see that the return date is the 31st of January. And that return date is to all of the people below. And that is a change in procedure. Before we said, just send it to your direct report and they'll send it through the channels. Well, now with the beauty of electronics, it means we can get it to everyone at once and people can start working with them. And you have no idea how much the national officers appreciate getting those early ones, because it means we're not scrambling in April to try to put it together, and we can really actually read what we get. So you are going to send it to your provincial education officer. You're going to send it to your provincial secretary. Now notice the exception in Ontario. It is a generic email you're sending it to, not directly to the provincial secretary. But your provincial education secretary or your provincial education officer and provincial secretary get a copy. You're going to send it to the national office, and that is a generic email where all the reports go as well, that the officers all have access to. So now you've got 3 places that you're sending it to, but it means it gets to all entities at one time. And so pay close attention to each of those. You only have to do it once. And then those chapters, such as in Quebec or Manitoba, who are sending them on, they send them directly to the national office, that 3rd bullet as well. So the more we get in, the sooner the better. And your primary officer's deadline is the 31st of January. It gives you the whole month of the new year to really look after them. All right, now the next part is really important, because so many times I will get, for instance, a report in and it's been scanned, which is absolutely fine to scan it, but it's blurred and I can't read something. So to have the education officers, whoever submitted it, contact information is very, very helpful. The other thing is the province, because I then sort them in my electronic file by province so that I can do them in that order. I don't know how other officers sort them, but it's just because on my sheet, on my Excel sheet, that's the way it works out. So that's the top part. And as I said, if you have anything you want to just jump in on, by all means do. Now, what happens if you're in a chapter that doesn't have an education report this year or doesn't have one ever? Please do not hand it in. Hand this piece of paper in. All you have to do is fill out that top part, tick off the box, send it on its way, and then we will put a nil report in, and we're not looking for your report or wondering what happened to it. And then there's the question of whether your chapter wants to adopt a school in Northern Ontario or Labrador. And that's an easy tick off too. And we do have the fillable forms, so it's pretty darn easy to do that part. All right, so we know when it's due, we know where it's sent, we know who the author is. Now we do want to know how your funds were expended in education. And we're going to get to a little more discussion once I take this off the screen. But you'll notice it's divided into local students. So in other words, who are you supporting in your community? And this is individuals. So if you needed to, you could actually put a name to the award if you needed to. And those are your scholarships, your bursaries, your grants, your awards, and so on. Then the next section is to your schools. So you've given something to a school library. You've given money for a school trip, for the graduation at the end of the year, Teacher Appreciation Day, whatever it is, but you've given it to the school, not to an individual. That's pretty easy. I have had a lot of questions, though, about camps and school trips and special event programs. And sometimes we have a cross between citizenship and education or services and education. And once we take this down off the screen, I do want to talk about that because it's probably the most common question I do get. You'll notice that Share a Story, Bring a Book is in here. That's the national program that you do every in conjunction with NAM. And sometimes that causes a question about where it is. And it's just because the schools they go to change every year. And so that they are going to specific schools, and it's the host province that makes the decision as to where they're going. So it doesn't belong under any particular, we've put it under local schools. But even though it might not be local for you itself. Outside schools is something else we're going to talk about. Again, we need to have those conversations with our citizenship colleagues and our service colleagues, because it becomes a question sometimes as to who is going to claim that particular use of funds. So we will definitely chat with that. Provincially, each province has its own PAT projects that you are contributing to. If you don't find it there is space to add it. These are the ones that we know are still active out there across the country. They're not in all provinces, but for instance, as it says there, Lucy Morrison is only in Ontario. Education Fund is in most provinces with provincial office, but your other ones, and you may have a new initiative, a new provincial initiative this year that we don't have on the form yet because it hasn't started. So by all means, you can add it in. And then finally, national. And again, those are the national projects that your chapter has the ability to vote funds towards. And you will know this year, added to it for the first time, is the Violet Downey Book Award. And you know that we do have enough money for 2025, but we do not have enough money at this point in time for 2026. So we're good up to this coming year, and then we have to see and make decisions based on what donations are given to us. So then we get to the very bottom, and this is the most important part of the whole form, is the narrative. And I always suggest to people that you type up the report as you're going to give it to your chapter for your year-end meeting about education, your narrative, your stories, and you attach it on a separate page, because there is absolutely no way, I don't believe, that you can get in the bottom unless you've only got one signature project. And if that's the case, then fine, fit it in and put it in there. The other thing I want to mention now is attached to the education form is the Adopted Schools report. So it's page 2. And make sure that you do send it on, even if you don't have an adopted school in Northern Ontario or Labrador, and just check off that box and take it in, because that makes it easier for us when we're trying to find out if we've got all the reports in or not. And it's there are no changes to that form this year. It is the same as in the past. And sometimes your class or your teacher might change from year to year. So make sure you're giving us all that information. And then they get sent in together now, not separately. Okay. And again, the narrative is what's important. That's really what makes these reports come alive. Renata, thank you very, very much for sharing. And if we can go back to full screen so I can see, I can't see all people. I can see on my screen, I can only see 10 at a time. So there's 6 of you I can't see. So please, by all means, jump in, or if you can get to that reaction. There we go, Michelle. The reaction key to put your hand up, I'd love it. So let's start with Michelle. She's got her hand up already, which is great.
Yeah, under the adopted school, I just wanted clarification, because it seems to change for the number of students. So it says in the form as of September enrollment. So we're doing September enrollment because there's the overlap. That's what I'm
Yes.
getting at. So for this past year, so we had September enrollment in 2023 and September enrollment in 2024. Because from January until June are our students that were enrolled in 2023 September, and then September to December are the ones from 2024. So we're adding the two numbers together. Is
No,
that correct?
that is not my understanding, but I will definitely double check that. My presumption on that one and belief was that you were putting the numbers of September of the year of the report. So this year it would be September 2024's enrollment. So but I could be mistaken on that. So
That's the way it was originally, but then there was some discussion because it's different students,
yep.
and within that 1 year you have one class and then another class. So I don't know. I think that really needs to be clarified.
I agree, Michelle. I will definitely clarify that, because I see what your point is. Last year's class could have had 8 students in the class and this year's could have 13. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Vicki.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
I certainly can.
All right, so this is my first year as education chair. So my main question is, where do I get the form?
Okay. You go on iode.ca. You go to member resources.
Okay, yeah, I know how to get there.
You've used the password. And then you will see on that page, that very first page, you will see a place where it says annual report forms. You click on that and you'll see all of them there, and they'll be in 2 different forms. There'll be in a fillable form. So you'll see education annual work form, and it'll be in a fillable form and a non-fillable form. I don't know why you would use anything but the fillable form.
Okay, my second question is, can I access last year's form as an example?
I don't believe so, but I think the new ones are up on the website. And if I'm wrong about that, then it will be the old one that's still there. I know the new,
like a filled one.
Oh, a filled one.
Your chapter would have that for you
Okay.
in their minutes.
Thanks,
Okay.
Lisa. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Right. Keep the questions coming, Vicki. Definitely. Any other questions before we move on from that? Okay, just a sec here. I just want to go back. Now, I want to talk about the narrative. Quite often, what people put in that narrative box at the bottom is 10 improvement awards given at an elementary school for a total price of $1,000. I'm just making that up, but that type of thing. That's fine. It tells me what that $1,000 number in the chart above is. That was for 10 awards, and that's terrific. But it's not very spicy. It's just giving me numbers and data. If you are reporting to your chapter afterwards about those 10 $100 awards that you've given out across your city or in your area or in a school, what kind of information are you giving your chapter about those awards? Is there some kind of story that goes along with it? Is there anyone in the workshop today that has found a way to expand just that basic statement that makes it interesting for your chapter and really makes your chapter proud of that $1,000 and those 10 awards that you've just given out, in order to encourage them to keep handing them out in the future. Michelle?
One of the things that I've done is when I get a thank you letter from the student, I will read that at the chapter meeting, and I'll sometimes include a quote in my report. One of the lines of the thank you, of the impact that like the grade 8 history award that we give out. Just to add that extra, I think sometimes when they hear from the students, it makes a big difference.
Love it. All right. So there's one idea. Add something from a thank you letter, a quote from the recipient, whatever you've got. Lisa.
I know it seems redundant for maybe the officer because they maybe have written this report 5 years running. But for those of us who read them at the provincial and national level, we don't remember that your award was in memory of some long-serving member of your chapter. So like that information is too. They're getting this scholarship because, you know, this long-serving chapter. Now, if you hand write your reports, I realize you kind of run out of room, but you can always just add another page to it before you scan it. But for the ones that are typing their reports, it's easy to add another Word document or PDF or something for us to read, because it, like you said, it gives a bit more spice and information. And I can't remember it. You know, when I'm reading reports from 40 some odd chapters, I can't remember that this chapter nursing award is in memory of so-and-so. And I don't have time to look back to every past year and past report. And the other thing is to don't use abbreviations. I spend so much time Googling what, you know, ILP or, you know, whatever means from this city, and it's some women's shelter or I don't know, a youth program. And I just spend all my time Googling, just trying to, so my report is complete when I send it in. So no abbreviations, and tell us who the award is in memory of.
I love those little 2 tricks for sure. And that's coming right from a provincial education officer who is reading multiple reports. And it also helps you remember and identify certain very interesting initiatives with chapters, which is helpful. Freda.
We tend to seek permission from the school if the child's picture can be put on our Facebook page so that everyone can see it. And also, with the adopted school, I've had very good luck since I've been education officer with the chapter from a number of years ago. They send pictures. So like if they get a box from me, they'll send a picture or something to that effect. And I had one just recently, and it was after a recent meeting, but the teacher had all the children in the classroom, and they're standing up there and they're waving their hands and saying thank you. And it's great to know that this particular teacher will do that every time she receives something. So, and I take a picture of it. I take my phone or my iPad to the chapter meeting and pass it around so everyone can see.
Picture's worth 1,000 words.
Right.
And that's the other thing. What that does is it allows you to use that monthly or bi-monthly reporting to your chapter about your education events. It allows you to use it with your chapter. But then if you've also written a small little narrative, you now have something that you can put in your annual report, which is going to go down in your record for the year, which is going to stay with your chapter for years and years and years and years. So you've done double duty, and you've only done it once, and then you can use that again, which is really helpful. You're not scrambling in January to find everything from the past 12 months. Other little tricks about how do you make the narrative something more than just numbers data. I'm going to throw something out there that I really find wonderful, heartwarming, I think is my word when I read something. When an education officer tells me the impact that something has had, and again, this goes back to what Michelle was saying about perhaps a quote, or you might be paraphrasing now. So let's say you've just given out a $1,500 first year scholarship to a nursing student. And one of your criteria has been that there had to be financial need. And you have received a thank you note from that nursing bursary student that said something like, I'm remembering one I got last year, and it said, the $1,500 award allowed me to pay my portion of the first and last month's rent on my apartment, which I didn't have before this. All of a sudden, that $1,500 that your chapter worked so hard to come up with for this award that is in memory of someone, all of a sudden it was real, because that's the difference that it made to that individual who received it. And thank goodness you got that thank you note where she expressed it. And the reason I did contact that chapter, the reason they were able to get that information is because the school contact has been the school contact at the high school for many years. And that school contact follows up with the kids in even after they've gone to make sure they're A-okay and that they've sent a thank you note to the chapter. So that's another little hint, is so much of the feedback that you might get about these awards really depends on the relationship you might have with the contact person where you're giving it. That was the other lesson that really came through in that one. Any other way that you can think of that you can show in your narrative on your report the impact that the dollars spent has had? Okay, I'm going to ask another question. Does anybody have a non-monetary initiative in education? Something that the chapter does that does not involve an expenditure of dollars? Kathy? And you're on mute, Kathy.
There we go. This past year, we undertook, because we're virtual, it's hard to raise funds or do something spread out. We did a letter writing campaign, and we solicited books for the school in Northern Ontario for their library. And we were fortunate that Penguin Random House donated 28 primary children's hardcover books, storybooks. So that didn't cost us anything. They donated that. And we also reached out to a First Nations group that owns and runs the Blue Heron Casino. They have a foundation which grants funds and an application process, and they were very generous and donated $1,500. So we had both the funds and the books. And when we were writing, asking for these donations, we said that we were looking for books to support the school that was celebrating a 10th anniversary of their new school, and that there was an extreme cost in the shipping of those books. So we wanted not only books, but funds, and we were fortunate to get both.
That is wonderful. And what a great example of in-kind materials that you received from Penguin, worth a lot of money, but it did not go through your books as such. We think about in-kind all the time with services, but we don't always think about it for education. So Kathy, that was a great example. You've just twig something else in my head about the First Nations group, which I've made a little note about to talk about after this. So thank you for that little twinge as well. Michelle.
Lois had her hand up before me.
Oh, did she?
If
Okay.
you want to go to, she's okay. Okay. I'll be really quick. We also, Trillium 2023, we had the pen pal writing. So we each wrote letters and then again, Christmas cards to the grade 1 class in Attawapiskat at the Attawapiskat Elementary School. And then the students wrote letters back to us. And so we've been doing this exchange of letter writing and getting to know the students. And it's really cool to get, the letter, like the letter I got from the little girl. She likes snowmobiling. I thought, wow, I used to snowmobile all the time with my boys. So we had a connection.
That's good. And not only was it non-monetary, but you got something spicy to to get back to the chapter on that is interesting about your audience, which is great. Lois.
What I have done in some of the chapters that I belong to that have less money is you do sort of little individual projects, or they can be a project for the whole chapter. And that is to give books, like you scout out your books in the little secondhand stores or wherever, and you give them to the little libraries, or you give them to a high needs school just to give to the kids, like put a box out in the exit and they can just pick them up, or into a daycare. And it's just a fun project that's sort of ongoing all the time. And then when you have a collection of books, that's what you do. And it's there's money, a little bit of money to you, but compared to what you can get in some of these secondhand bookstores or secondhand places, the books are usually just pick through them and get the best and wipe them down a bit. And it has been appreciative, even though it's just out of the big scheme of things, one small thing.
Well, that's excellent. And you even talked there about the little libraries in the community, and what a great thing to participate in and keep those books up. And that is not money out of the coffers in the chapter, but it's certainly education in the community outside of schools, which is definitely worthy and to report.
And also the little libraries, scoot out the ones that you can find near schools, because those books are a lot cheaper, so they're directly going back to the kids. Is my makes my heart feel good.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, and but that's one of our rewards, isn't it? Warming up our hearts, for sure. The other thing is sometimes I do hear about reading, like going in and volunteering in a school. Don't hesitate to mention that in your education report, that they go in and they read with children, or they take a reading group. They volunteer in the school. Now, the volunteer hours are going to be obviously recorded by citizenship, the hours that you're in there. But the fact that you are in there with the reading group or helping the children, then that is definitely worthy of putting in your report. So don't forget the non-monetary items that go through your chapter. You do have things in addition to that, for sure. Freda and Shirley Ann. So I don't know who got up there first, but
I've been trying to get up several times. I was pushing one hand where I wasn't pushing raise the hand.
All right, Freda, go right ahead.
Something that you're going to talk about later is that crossing over between education and services. And one of the things that our chapter does, it's not book learned, except it's food learned to feed the tummies. So we have a group of ladies who go in and we make whatever the, it's called a Be Me Kids School that's looked after in the community and so on. And we bake whatever the head of the Be Me Kids organization that day tells us she'd like. It could be muffins for the morning breakfast program. It could be pancakes, which was on yesterday's agenda. And of course, you know, the old saying that they can't learn if they're not fed. So I don't know if that would fit into what you're asking for or not, but we think we're doing something wonderful that the children have full tummies. This is not for the whole school necessarily, but for children who need to go there for breakfast.
Most definitely. This is one of the items that really causes discussion every year.
Yeah.
And that is when you are doing, some people do a breakfast program, some people do a snack program, sometimes there's a lunch program, sometimes it's hot lunch once a month that they go in. And they might either just give their volunteer time to do it, or they might actually pay for it out of the coffers. And the question is, when you're doing it in a school, is it services because you're feeding kids? And generally when we feed kids through a food bank or whatever, we put it under services. Is it education because without a good meal, kids can't learn? Or is it citizenship because you're giving your time if you're going in there and volunteering? And this is constantly a discussion that goes on.
Yeah.
Before we go into that discussion, Shirley Ann, you had your hand up before.
I did, but it actually leads right into the next discussion, Karen, so I shall wait a moment.
Okay, for the services versus that one?
Education versus citizenship, and it sort of lends itself to the pen pal.
Okay, super. Right. Lisa Klosser, is yours about the how do we decide, or is it a different idea about what we're actually going to put in the narrative and what's money and what's whatever?
Yeah, it was just how do we decide?
Okay, so that's very, very timely then. Let's go on that. So these are the three, right? It's citizenship, services, and education, and we overlap all the time, as we should, because our good work qualifies for all of it, and those are the three areas IODE works in. So why would it be strange that we don't overlap? So the first thing I'm going to say is the ground rule is make sure you're talking to your partners before you're doing your report. There is no problem in both or all of you reporting it, but if there's money involved, you don't want to double report it. So that's your end result. You can all talk about it in your narrative, no problem, because you're feeding the mind, you're feeding the belly, and you're probably giving some of your volunteer time depending on the initiative. And Shirley Ann, I'm really glad you caught that about the pen pals, because those are the kinds of hours we forget about, right? To count. But let's not count the money twice. So Shirley Ann, I'm going to go to you first. How do you think? What are you thinking about this?
So we have one member in our chapter who answers letters to Santa Claus. And so to me, it's sort of a real stretch on the pen pal issue because there's nothing that comes back, but it's what did come in is going back out. I think it needs to be in the narrative of the education, but also in citizenship. There is no money involved in it, but we can mention under education that that's what we do, and then just sort of expand and put it into the secretary's report.
All right. Very, very good. And you arrive at that because you talk to your secretary, you talk to your citizenship officer, and you as education, you've brought it up and you decide. And I really like that. Everybody can talk about it. Who cares if it's in your annual report 3 times? This is a cool initiative. We want to celebrate, but don't forget to count your hours. Every single time that member picks up that pen and starts writing letters from Santa, that is your time. So let's not forget those hours. They're so precious and they're so invaluable. Vicky.
Okay, we've been doing some fundraising that it goes into all goes into one pot, but we've been billing it as fundraising to support our scholarships. So that's my question is, how do I report that as money coming in? Is that because I haven't been spearheading those? I've participated, but I haven't been in charge of those fundraising events.
Well,
Do I
usually
still report them as part of my education report?
you don't report the fundraising part. So the fact, like what you did to earn the money, will probably come in your secretary's report. All right. So how you actually brought the money into the chapter and where the revenue came from, whatever it is, whether it's butter tarts, apple pies, a Christmas tour, or a book sale, doesn't make any difference. That's probably coming in your secretary's report. But if you have $5,000 worth of fundraising or $500 worth of fundraising, and 400 of it has been used for awards at a school, you are going to report $400 that you've purchased awards for the school. That other $100 that was raised is going to be reported under some other department, depending on what it was used for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
You only include money you've spent. You don't include money you've raised. Your report is only your expenses.
Okay.
Your treasurer will report income, but education is just what you put out in
so yeah, so we
in
have
actual monetary value or value in kind.
I have the money that was actually given out as scholarships, and then we put on a day where we bring the students in and their families and hand them out. So we have expenses for that day.
That's
hall
right.
rental and food and papers and printing and stuff like that. So that's what I report.
You know, you don't even report those expenses. That's your treasurer. That's what Lisa was saying. In the treasurer's report, the treasurer will have a section where it says projects, and it'll have revenue from projects, and then they'll have the expenses from projects. So your treasurer actually reports the in and the out of the money. What you report is the money that the chapter has designated to those education awards.
Okay.
All right. So let's go back to you've just raised $500 at a used book sale. You had $50 of expenses. You advertised, you got some signs for the book sale. You had to buy some boxes to put the books in, and you spent $50. So now you're down to $450 that you've earned. The treasurer is reporting that. Right? So you don't have to worry about money in, money out for that fundraiser. But then at the next chapter meeting, your treasurer reported that the net profit of your used book sale was $450, and your chapter voted to give $400 for the awards at such and such school. Now, that's what you report, is the $400, and you're reporting it under, depending on what it's for. If you're giving it to the school for the school library, you report it under local school. If you've given it for $8 $50 gift cards for kids for some project, then you report it under individual awards.
What about money? Most of our scholarship money is processed through a foundation.
Yes.
So we've put money in and then we get money back out. So any of that's not my problem either.
Well,
like if some of that money we raised gets put into the foundation, that's not my thing. That's the treasurer's thing.
reporting the money that's in the foundation is definitely the treasurer's thing, by all means, Vicky. But if they've taken money out of the foundation to do, let's say you've done a $2,000 award for graduating students starting university. That $2,000 award is yours to report.
Yeah, the money that we took out and gave to a student, for sure.
But you don't have to worry about the foundation finances at all. That's your treasurer's job.
Okay.
Okay. Lisa,
Yep,
was there
thanks.
something else at this point that you were going to share with us?
I was just going to say, in my previous primary chapter, one way we kind of helped our services officer and our education kind of arm wrestle over who got to report what. We said services was for the body and education was for the mind. So if it was sports equipment for the gym at the school, services got it. If it was the breakfast club, services got to report it. If it was books for the library or a new laptop or, whatever for a classroom, it was education. So that was just one way at our primary chapter. We just stopped all that. No, I'm going to report that. No, I'm going to report that. No, I am. So that was just one way we did it.
And the most important thing you talked about there is you had a discussion about it. And either it was between your president and your two officers, or it was an open discussion at the primary meeting as to how you were going to do it. You had the discussion and you decided. I've heard some people who have said that anything to do with food, the money expended was going to go on services, but the narrative was going in education and services about they were doing it because it was helping learning. And if there were hours involved, they were, of course, in citizenship. But the thing is, you've had the discussion, and that's the most important part, and come to a agreeable conclusion. Kathy? Oh, you're on mute, Kathy.
Sorry. I wanted to ask about something like Flip Give.
Yes.
Which if we print up some of the flyers or from the bulletins and use them as a giveaway at a function to the public and family and friends and whatever, and hoping that they are using Flip Give to raise funds. Those, and I may not know how Flip Give actually works, but we've had a bit of an expenditure, not a big deal, no concern, but we have no way of knowing what was raised. Am I correct in my understanding of that? Because it would all go directly into the national office?
That's right. You will not know which of those individuals that you gave information flyers to actually followed up. We, at the office, we will get an ongoing tally of the percentage back that's coming in. It may or may not be clear depending on how they've identified themselves when they've registered with Flip Give. So each year, we can, on an ongoing basis, Mary can go into Flip Give and she can find out what our accumulative total has been with Flip Give. We do get notices when there is a new person contributing, signed up under IODE Canada and contributing. We do get that information. But if that person is not identified in any way, we don't know whether that person was associated with your chapter or another chapter. So we don't have that information. But you did definitely, your treasurer can claim that expenditure either under the administrative area, or you can have an actual project designated for it, one or the other. But printing generally goes under the administrative line of the treasurer's report.
Okay, so there would not be a narrative necessarily to contribute. We can say we did this, but we would never know what the results were.
That's correct. And that narrative really should go under services, okay, because the end result of the Flip Give money is designated towards the snack pack costs, which is services.
Okay.
But
Thank
definitely, that's a really, really wonderful thing to report. The other place it should be reported, Kathy, is under your communications in PR. Because in giving that flip kit give flyer out, I'm also hoping that you're giving out something to do with IODE and the fact that it's IODE. So there's your communications PR part of it as well. So that should be going, that narrative should go on both of those reports.
Okay. Well, actually, it's a community event that we're setting up, or I'm setting up a table for
Yes.
IODE, and it will have a number of different pieces on.
Yes. So that's your PR communications report.
Oh, okay. All right.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Good. Vicki, one more then before we go on.
Okay, I personally purchased a couple of the books from the award at the NAM.
Yes, out of
and
the
then
dark.
I donated them to local libraries on behalf of the chapter.
Yes.
So where would that go?
That is an in-kind donation. It definitely goes under education, and it definitely goes in your narrative. And
Okay.
I see that. I would imagine more than 30%, less than 50% of the education reports speak to donating Violet Downey Book Award shortlist and winners to schools. And they talk about the chapter donating them. And when the chapter donates them, you do have an actual amount that you're going to report in the numbers section. But I do also get members donating out of their own pocket to their local library, to their affiliated school. That goes in your narrative. So that is a non-monetary part. When we were talking before, another great example of the non-monetary. And of course, in Ontario, we also have the Jean Troop Book Award every year, which is the picture books, sort of like the up to 6-year-olds type of literature. And we have a lot of that reported as well. So that's a good one. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's really important not to miss out on that, particularly if individuals in your chapter are doing it on their own, for sure. Same with your adopted schools report. Quite often we have individual people who are supporting an adopted school as opposed to just the chapter. Don't forget that when you're doing your adopted schools report, that those donations are reported in the narrative of your adopted school, even though the money has not gone through your books. All right. So anything else in regards to that gray area between services, citizenship, and education? Lisa?
I guess it's not about that gray area, but what you were just saying about the individual versus the chapter adopted class information. On the form, it shows for your chapter's adopted class and then one individual's adopted class information. So our chapter actually has 2 or 3 individuals that have adopted class information. So last year, we attached additional reports for these individuals. So we had multiple page 2s of the education report, but only one made it into the annual report out of all the multiple ones. And so the narrative didn't match our chapter expenditures, because it was a narrative from an individual, but the financial report was from our chapter. So I just, for the few chapters that do have multiples, I don't know how to make it easy for the people receiving these emails that there's multiple ones for this one primary chapter. I could include that maybe just in the email, just say, by the way, be aware.
So you're saying that what was not included in the annual report?
It got the financial came from our primary chapter adopted class. We have two
Right.
classes actually.
Right.
But the narrative that was reported it could have been Ontario, maybe it wasn't national. I'd have to pull out my annual report. But one of the reports had the narrative, and I think maybe even a photo was the individual's person. And then the grand total of all the individuals plus the chapter was not reflected in the report. So I spoke to Aileen Reed about this, and I know she's aware of it, but I'm just wondering if any other chapters are in that same position. How can us primary chapters make it clear so the grand total is being reported? I don't know.
So you did have the figures from your 3 individual adopted schools and the money spent. You did have the data.
Yes, there was 3 separate page 2s, but only one figure was reported. And then the narrative that matched it didn't match, which is fine.
So
no one would know about it but me, but I'm just wondering how to avoid this or how to make it streamlined.
So wouldn't the top part of the adopted school report, wouldn't you put the totals, the primary education officer, wouldn't they add the total number of adopted classrooms and put it in the top of it?
Yes, looking at the form, it seems quite clear. Yeah, so I'm not sure if maybe what we'll do for the narrative is just add it to a Word document so it's not 3 separate page 2s. Maybe that was the confusing part.
Yeah, that might work, Lisa, because I was just saying that top paragraph, we should have, like, if there are 5 schools altogether, 2 with the chapter and 3 with individuals, the numbers in the top half of the adopted schools should reflect the numbers from all 5 schools. And then you've got the 2, I can see the problem with a chapter's adopted class information because you've got 2 of them. And then individual adopted class information, you got 3 of them. I think that's where the confusion's probably coming in. And then, of course, the details of the activities, you can put all 5 of them in. I think the key part's going to be putting the total for all 5 classrooms in that top section. That would be my advice or my go around for it, because I can see how that would be complicated in filling out your forms, for sure. That's a good one. Good problem to have if there are 5 schools being all looked after by one chapter. Very nice. Anything else with that that gray area there between those 3 departments and how we're working around it? Okay, terrific. Then we're going to go back to our outline. I would say, okay. Let's talk a little bit about recording your initiatives and recording your through the year. So your education officer for your primary chapter, how do you report, not just in January after the year is over or in December as the year is concluding? How do you report your initiatives from January through December to your chapter? All right, Shirley Ann?
In our chapter, the education officer during our general meetings gives us a verbal, but she also sends a written to the secretary and the president.
So you have it on your monthly or bi-monthly agenda, however often your chapter meets.
That's right. There's always a report by the education officer with whatever the initiative is that she's working on.
All right, excellent. And then there is a verbal report with your juicy highlights and your exciting stuff to make sure that the chapter members are keen about education and want to vote more money again. And then there's the written report that goes to the secretary to be included in those minutes.
Exactly.
All right, and that's excellent because then it makes it a heck of a lot easier for you when you're doing your report in December or January. You've got X number of reports that you've given to your chapter over the time, and you're not doing all the work at the end. So that's one really good strategy. Make sure you're giving a report, even if it's a nil report, even if you're saying to your chapter, okay, nothing new this month in education, we'll get to you next month, or this is coming up, or whatever the case might be. All right, anything else? Betsy.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the same as Shirley Ann's chapter, the 48th, we have a regular time for all officers to report, and they are written and handed in. Usually some are verbal, but the education is always written, especially if there is significant money involved. But also they're reported chronologically and in anticipation of awards coming up. For instance, public education's competitions in February will put a motion forward in January for that so that they know what to expect. And then other new initiatives are usually started by the executive following a new executive meeting in February or end of January. And then that is presented to the chapter and then worked into our chronology of education support throughout the year.
So it sounds as if the chapter has clearly outlined a year plan where things are happening, at least the things that are regular, awards that you're giving annually or events that you're supporting annually. So those are laid out ahead of time.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
Linda.
Yes. Aside from all the annotations during meetings and everything, I was just thinking, and I've used this many times with my planner. There is a spot on the side of the planner where you can actually make notations of what initiative you've started, because sometimes you even forget to write it for the meetings. So this way you just go to your planner and see what you've done.
Perfect. Love it. And that's where 2 years ago, I started doing my volunteer hours on that right-hand side of the planner. And I write them in the day in a red ink as opposed to my blue ink.
Yeah.
So when you look at my month, you can clearly see where I'm doing IODE because it's all red ink. And on the right-hand side says the 14th of the month, X number of hours. And then when it comes up at the end of the month and you're reporting it to the chapter, I just add all those up and away I go. And that has made my life so much easier by doing it as I go. There it is. Linda's doing the same thing. Yeah, I love that. And that helps. That would help too. There's also a place on every double page, and it's either in the top left or on the bottom right. There's a rectangular box just because of the way the month goes.
Yeah.
That's another really good place to write down.
Right up there.
Yes. So
Yeah.
if you've got something you know is coming up in education, that you know that you support a graduation in May, and in April you have to contact someone, it's a really good place to put things in so that you're not doing them last minute and you're scrambling. That's the other thing I like about that clean box there. There's lots of room to write in. Okay, so the planner's a really good way to record it. Vicki?
I keep track of everything electronically. I don't use the paper planner.
Yeah.
So I've got my yearly to-do list because everything I do is leading up to that day when we give out those scholarships. I've got it's a Word table, like a Word document,
Yep.
and I've got it in the form of a table. So I've got a column for who's doing it, when does it have to be done, who's doing it, what has to be done, when did it get done, and comments on what happened. And that's my running yearly to-do list. And if I think of something else that I hadn't originally put in the plan, I can just add a line to that table to add that thing that I need to do or that I need to get someone to do. And I think it's about 5 pages long at this point because I record everything that happened. So one item might be several lines wide, so that's why it's so long. But it's just a running electronic document, and I have it color coded, and that's
great.
how
Do you know who's going to love that? Whoever you pass it on to that takes education after you're finished with it. That is going to be amazing for that next person, especially when they're brand new and they're like deer in the headlights trying to figure out what the heck's going on and when it happens, and not scrambling just at the last minute to do what needs to be done.
And even myself next year.
Oh,
not having to remember and make it all up again from scratch because, oh yeah, that's what I did in March of last year because I had this deadline of April 15th.
And we're not very good anymore with time, right? All of a sudden it's just here. We can't believe how fast time goes. All right, so there are a couple tips and tricks so you're not scrambling in December and January at the last minute. The other thing is, I hope you have a really good relationship with your treasurer. So in December, your treasurer can give each of the officers a little list of what has been spent in each of the departments, because inevitably we miss something. There might have been one of those little things that came up that we didn't even write down in our planner or our electronic chart or whatever. So, but your treasurer has to keep track of it because she has to report it at year end under the money, under the expenditures and the revenues and what went in and what went out. So everything has to be there. So it's just a quick check. Remember though, your treasurer does not keep track of in-kind values. That's up to you. So all those things we talked about before that does not involve the exchange of dollars, those things we do or that individuals in our chapter do on their own, that is definitely our job as the officer to make sure we're keeping track of that. All right, so recording initiatives, sharing initiatives, we've really, that was about really talking with your chapter members about what's going on in education. Because not only is it important for all our members to be excited about what we are doing and the effects that we're having in our community and to know it, we might get it because we get that thank you note that Michelle talked about at the very beginning of this meeting. And as an education officer, we've got our heart warmed, but let's warm our whole chapter's hearts and make sure we're sharing all those fun things. And the other thing is that how else are we sharing them? Are we sharing them on our social media? Are we sending out little things? Let's say your meeting was last night, as yesterday, as mine was. And on Thursday of this week or Monday of next week, I get some really lovely thing in via email. Are we sending that out to our chapter members right away so they can enjoy it as much as we're enjoying it? Because I might actually forget to share it with them 4 weeks from now. So that's the other thing. Don't hesitate to share with your chapter members fun, good, wonderful things that are happening. You've taken a picture when you've gone to a school or given out an award, or you're working with children, or you've delivered books or whatever. Share it on your social media if you have it, or an email if you've got that, or at the chapter on your iPad, as someone had mentioned at the beginning. So don't forget to share. Don't keep everything to yourself. And thank you so much for all of those ideas and that you've come up with and been willing to share here this morning. Now, anything else about the form, about reporting, confusions, ideas, things that have been really impactful for you, made the education job wonderful, that you heard from your education officer that you love to hear about, that we can share with the others before we wind up? Lisa?
I just have a question on the report for, let me see, Born to Read.
Yes.
It's listed for provincial. So we do the Born to Read program, but we donate about 20 or more book bags to our local libraries. And so there's a value for the fabric and the donated books. So we include that in other education work outside of schools.
Yes.
But should we be putting it under provincial? Because we're not really sending it on to provincial. We're just keeping it local.
Correct. No, you are putting it in the right spot.
Okay.
The Born to Read under provincial is for those chapters who do have a provincially coordinated Born to Read program. Okay. So if it is coordinated by the provincial chapter, then and you participate and contribute to that provincial initiative, then it goes on under provincial. But if you on your own are doing entry book bags for your JKs at your local school every year, and you do 20 book bags and put a couple books in it and away you go, then that is your chapter's initiative. If you're doing it with a community center, then it's outside of schools, it's that other. And it's definitely your chapter's work, and you're not doing it to contribute to a provincial project. And that may be true of other projects as well. All right, so are you doing it locally just on your own, or are you doing it as part of a province-wide initiative? Any other questions that come up or wonderings that you have? Oh, Vicky, what a beautiful partner you've got there. Oh, how lovely. All right. Anything else that's come up? Questions, sharing, ideas, little points of interest? All right. So in conclusion, what I would just like to say is, let's tell our stories. Let's just not talk about the money we're spending. It's important. The money we're spending is, important. We can't do our work sometimes without it. But it's not the thing that makes a difference in our hearts about IODE. What makes a difference in our hearts is when we know the impact something has had, or how appreciated something has been, or how that those books that contributed to an in-classroom library that had nothing, how that went. Oh, and I forgot to go back to something. And I forget who it was now. But it had something when you started talking about First Nations group and donated funds for books. Kathy, thank you very, very much. And I wrote it down. I put a big star on it. I wanted to remind you about the guideline of ask, listen, act. So I don't care who it is we are giving to, be it a First Nations school, be it a community center, be it a classroom library in your local school, doesn't matter where it is. I think as IODE members, we are getting beyond the point of having us presume that we know what they need. we need to be constantly asking the recipients if this is what they still need. So even with our awards, if we're putting out hundreds of dollars a year in awards, is that the award that the school really needs? Is that how they need the money? Is that the recognition that the kids need today? Let's constantly be asking our recipients if this is the way we can have the biggest impact on the children. So what is needed? And Kathy, you brought it to mind when you talked about the First Nations classroom or school, because we really need then to make sure that what we are looking for and helping them with is what they need, and we have not just presupposed and put something in there. Someone talked about at the beginning an award that is in memory of an individual, and maybe it's been going on for 30 years. And 30 years ago, that award that we had in memory of that very special person was exactly what that school needed. But is it what they need today? Is there something else that would be just as beneficial in that individual's name that would help in a way, or fill a hole in that school that they need that they don't have at the time? So that's what I wanted to come back to. And I really wanted to thank Kathy, and I unfortunately hadn't written her name down next to it, for bringing that up. So let's make sure we're asking, we're listening, and then we're acting. And we may have to take it back to the chapter to change criteria or change guidelines of what we're doing. Is that Families First program that we're supporting at the community center, are we giving them what they need at this point in time, or is it what they needed 15 years ago? So that's, I wanted to then thank you, Kathy, for bringing that point to mind. I think it was actually and it really is important when we're working services and education together, or citizenship and education together. Are we doing it in the most effective, efficient manner? Any last comments from anyone? Linda?
Yes, I just remembered that at our chapter one time, there was a lady who moved to Guelph, and way back when she was in Sarnia, she got an IOD award. And so she came to us and she says she wanted to give $500 to someone like in the Sarnia area. I think it's important when we're giving our narrative to include how something like that came about, because it's remarkable how some people can pay back in various ways. And there was also another woman who whose daughter lives in Sarnia, and she's up north near Sudbury, and she wanted to donate something for any student in the local schools, because her roots were here and her daughter lives here. So it's kind of interesting, some of these narratives, and we mustn't forget how sometimes some things come about. That's all I have to say.
Oh, Linda, I'm so glad that you spoke to that, because we do get one-time donations from people because for different reasons. So how does that come about? And how was the decision made as to how it was going to be used? Yeah. And that is definitely part of the narrative and the interesting part of the why we are doing it, or the how. So thank you.
And then when we wrote a thank you letter to this girl in Guelph, like she became interested in IODE, and I don't know if because there are a couple of chapters in Guelph that that were in existence at that time, but I don't know if she joined.
Okay. Well, and that may be a nice little perk of that too, right?
Yeah.
Vicki?
Okay, so 2 of my scholarships are specifically directed to women.
Yes.
And that just kind of tickles a little alarm in my brain. Like, is that acceptable to still specify that only a woman can receive this money?
I think your chapter has to look, doesn't matter what criteria you're using, all right? If it's, criteria for needing financial assistance, or a female recipient, or a minority, it doesn't matter what your criteria are. Citizenship has to be part of it. Volunteerism has to be part of it. I don't think it matters what your criteria are, as long as your rationale for it is sound. So has this been thought through? So for instance, a very common one in the last 10 years has been putting out STEM, all right, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics awards to promote it among women, and the recipients then be women. And the rationale was very sound, because we wanted to promote more women having clear sailing into those fields, because it wasn't an even level playing field. So the rationale was very sound for that. Sometimes when we give out education awards through shelters, we give out education awards for either children or women who are in shelters, who need help as to get their life back in order, or to help their children advance beyond what they're experiencing. Very, very good reason why the criteria is for a woman in a shelter or a child of a woman in a shelter. We're okay. We've got sound rationale. So it doesn't matter what your criteria is, just make sure you're reevaluating the criteria from time to time, and you're not presupposing something that is no longer relevant.
Yeah, most of our criteria were established by the original donors who put the money in, for the money that went into the foundation to continuously fund these scholarships. So it's been specified by the donors.
Yeah, and terms of reference, you have to honor them, but you also can review them. And as a chapter, if that person is still alive, then you can go back to that person to suggest changes in terms of reference. If they are no longer alive, I believe that it is up to your chapter to decide whether those terms of reference are still valid today. I'll give you a really big countrywide example. Our War Memorial scholarships over all these years have changed terms of reference many, many times based on the times. It started out being young men coming back from the war and needing help to get back into their educational life. And it has changed 3 or 4 times until today. The terms of reference are PhD students in at least their second year of PhD research. So that's come a long way, baby. But there's good rationale as the terms of reference of that endowed fund that has many, many criteria and restrictions on it, but it has evolved based on the times. Is that helpful, Vicki?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it will be easy, but all right. Any other comments before we wind up? Well, ladies, thank you very, very much for your participation today. I really, really appreciate the sharing. We always have expertise on the screen, and it was really nice to see that come forward this morning. And a couple of you whom I've never met in person before, or even this way, really nice to be able to put a face and a name together and meet you here today for the first time. What a treat. So have a wonderful day. I hope some of you have brighter weather than we do here in Southern Ontario today. It's a little dull, but whatever you do with your day, make it a good one. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Kathy, it was good to see you. Have a great cruise and say hi to your brother